Good morning, and welcome to Tampa City Council held this day, March 23rd, 2023. Roll call, please. Excuse me, I apologize. Councilman Carlson, you have invocation today.
Yes, good morning. I'd like to introduce, for the many-teenth time, the Right Reverend Jeffrey Alex James Johnson, Ph.D. He is seen and acknowledged as a voice for this generation. He has an amazing ability to minister effectively to all age groups. His dynamic preaching, teaching, and leadership style is coupled with an intellectual and spiritual approach to real life, accompanied by a down-to-earth sense of humor. His footprints in the ministry started in 1994, and his pastoral ministry began in 2001. a boy preacher, Johnson knew at the age of 5 that the Lord anointed him to change the world. Through his academic pursuits, Dr. Johnson studied at Warner University, Anderson University, and St. Thomas Christian University, and has earned a Bachelor of Arts in Church Ministry and a Master of Ministry from Warner University and a Master of Theology and Doctor of Philosophy in Christian Thought. He was also honored by St. Thomas Christian University for his commitment to ministry with a Doctor of Divinity degree in 2006. He's also, among many other things we just mentioned, a Navy chaplain stationed at MacDill, and he works for the CDC. Reverend Johnson. If we'll stand to say the invocation, then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning to all of you. Good morning. Will you bow your heads with me as I pray? Dear wise and loving Father, first, please allow me to say thank you. On behalf of all of us who are gathered here today, thank you for your many abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself. For the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of being appropriated with responsibilities in this life. Thanks as well as for the freedom to embrace you and the freedom to reject you. Thank you for loving us even so from your boundless and gracious name. In the scriptures, you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore, I pray for our mayor, for our city council and city officials, and in particular, those who are gathered here today. I'm asking that you will graciously grant them wisdom to govern amidst conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of welfare and true needs for our people, a keen thirst for justice and righteous, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, personal peace in their lives, and joy in their tasks. Finally, Father, I pray for the agenda set before them today. Please give assurance of what will please you and what will benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Tampa. In your most beloved name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, now we'll have roll call.
Carlson? Vera?
Here.
Maniscalco?
Here.
Hurtak?
Here.
Goods?
Here.
Miranda?
Here.
Cedra?
Here.
We have physical quorum.
Mr. Shelby.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to give us presentations of guidelines?
No longer, sir. There's
Excellent.
no need to. It's now
Excellent.
part of your rules. And that is
Yeah.
actually, I'm going to be working with the clerk's office to have the agenda itself amended to reflect the changes.
Just so the viewing audience knows what's going on, can you just give a brief talk on why we are no longer going to do presentations of guidelines?
That's because those guidelines have been incorporated into your rules of procedure, a copy of which, newly amended, is in front of you, and I've also emailed it to the administration to distribute to the city staff, and that was adopted by resolution number 2023-251 on March 16th. And what that does then is it refers people to the instructions and that are available, which will be on the agenda and also importantly on the city's website at tampa.gov/city council. So from this point forward, communications media technology is now incorporated into your rules, and there is no longer a need for me to speak about it any longer unless absolutely necessary, and I don't intend to.
Thank you, Mr. Shelby. Finally catching up after COVID. Okay, we are going to now go to public comment. Anyone wishing to give public comment at this time, would you please approach the podium in the front of the room? And you will be given 3 minutes for public comment. If you could please state your name.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Sally Issy Lee from the Volunteer Missionary Society, Penny Fund, and I have been a minority business for 3 years. It is now my time to be recertified. And I'm at the Dry Bones Bureau, and I need help. And I would like to ask you to ask Chief Deputy Johnson that I wanted to apply for one of the small grants that he has. And I thought, since you all know me, you might recommend my program. I've been working and running for a long time, trying to get a project going. This is my book of work for the past 3 years. I walked 5,000 miles for housing and homelessness, and now I want to get a building and my grant funded. And this is the work, and it was everything that, I don't know Chief Deputy Johnson, but I had got a referral when I heard him on the radio Saturday. And Bishop Patty had referred me also. My program, she is given, and it's only been running on a small amount of funding. And after we got closed, I had just moved from the library to 50th Street, and we got closed down 2 days later. But who can you be afraid of when you're working for God and doing his business? And I am, and I would like you all to recommend to him to let me apply for one of the grants. I don't know Chief Deputy Johnson. I just heard him and I called him later. And I'm still waiting to hear from him. And this would be an outstanding grant. And this, all the proof you need, this is work. Real work that I've done. And I would truly like to get some help so that we can open back up. And I ask God to just help me. Here's, I had out mine. And we were having a 1 hour lemonade sale at the Bella Mart store. 1 hour, that's all she gave me. And we'll be selling lemonade for $2 a cup. And I would like you all to come. And I would like somebody to say that they'll support this grant. And if you want to read it, you can. And I'm Sally Lee with the Volunteer Missionary Society Penny Fund. Thank you. If there's no questions.
Mr. Shelby, Mr. Shelby.
This is a grant through the city, is that correct?
Yes, Chief Deputy Johnson, I think he said he had 5 different grants, and I would like to apply, and I would like to get recommended again for some help.
And the question then that I have, and I don't have the quick
Mr.
answer.
Shelby,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chair, recognize.
Please.
Mr. Shelby, let Mr. Shelby finish, and then I recognize you, Councilman Goose. Thank you.
It may be relevant to what I'm about to say, so if, with all deference, if I can yield to Mr. Good, sir.
Ms. Carey,
Councilman Goode, you're
Mr.
recognized.
Shelby, she's probably talking about the TPD CARES grant they're giving out to different organizations. So, Ms. Sally, I personally will send a memo over to Deputy Chief Johnson if he'll get in contact with you of how to fill out the application. They might have different criteria. I don't know if you may meet all those different criteria, but I'll be sure to have Deputy Chief Johnson to try to get in contact with you. So if you just go next door to the office, leave your number or an email, I'll make sure he gets it today, okay?
All right, thank you, sir.
All
right.
And God bless and save us all and save America. Amen.
And thank you, Councilman, and following that up, if this is a function of the administration, what it sounded like she was requesting may not be appropriate for you to do from the dais. So I just wanted to raise that issue, but it looks like the solution has been produced. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Stephanie Pointer. I wanted to confirm that this is a workshop so I can comment on the other items as they are heard, correct? That's usually the case. Okay, I just want to make sure. There's a couple little things that I would like to address. One, it's my understanding that we had candidates that were running for office who did not live in the city of Tampa. And when I contacted the Board of Elections, they said, not our problem. We don't check that. Now, I will note that when Councilwoman Hurtak was appointed, there were 2 people who ran for that, who wanted to be included in that. And they were almost immediately, probably within 24 hours, ruled out as non-citizens of the city of Tampa. I would like to know why it was allowed to continue, why it's not been followed up on, why, if somebody asked about it, why it wasn't investigated. There's one that I'm fairly certain of. I looked at the tax records. The tax records say that they live in Riverview. They had homestead there, so that's another issue. And here's my problem. My problem isn't with an individual candidate. My problem is that that candidate probably forced us into a runoff, which costs tax dollars. That's an issue for me. Everybody should have to verify where they live. And standing up there and saying, I filled out this paperwork and I didn't lie on it, isn't enough for me, personally. So I would like that, I've already contacted Ms. Zellman about it about a couple weeks ago, just before the election. But I would also like that City Council takes some type of action on it, because the Board of Elections says, we don't touch that, we don't do that. And so there needs to be an ordinance of some sort that requires that folks need to be in the city, and that requires somebody to verify that. And I know it can be done because it was done when Ms. Hurtak was appointed. So I would like to make sure that that happens in the future. I'd like to talk to you for just a second about the Mayor's Neighborhood University. It's my understanding that my neighborhood leaders are not being placed in the Mayor's Neighborhood University, and I know that none of you have anything to do with it, and you've never been invited, you've never attended unless you were a neighborhood leader. But it's my understanding, and I have already emailed about it, but I didn't get a response, that only brand new neighborhoods are being allowed to attend. But FAN is not being informed about these new neighborhoods or their participation in the city. Why? Just asking. So those are a couple little things that I wanted to address, and I want to say thank you from the very bottom of my heart. You know how near and dear CMT was to me, because most of you heard about it when you tried to turn it off when the governor wanted to turn it off. It's very, very important that the citizens of Tampa have a voice in this chamber, because that's the only place they have a voice. Thank you.
Uhuru Mentezna, Tampa, Florida. I say Uhuru because Uhuru means freedom in Swahili. And we say we as African people should always be thinking about our freedom. When I say the word freedom, it brings a joy to my heart to know we can think about freedom. But the fact of the matter is, this city council, like other city councils, like other government throughout the entire United States, throughout the world, they're most like functionaries in puppet governments and they're not even leaders. They're not even leaders. And the fact of the matter is that we see what happened in New York, we see what happened with Donald Trump, we see what happened with other people, that, hey, anybody can run for these offices and anybody can get it. They had a man from McDonald's running from the office for like to be in city government. Ain't nobody know him nothing but being an employer, and that's it. Nothing in the community, nothing anywhere, nobody know him for. Other than a big fiasco he had down in the neighborhood down in Bayshore Boulevard. But that's a certain kind of reality that we as African people, different people have different problems. We see African people come down here, they talk about speed bumps, drugs, loud music, whatsoever they talk about. You know, but it's of no significance. We as African people, when we approach these city councils and city government and private corporations, we need to talk about reparations. And I want to say to black people, that white people have a duty and responsibility. They owe us trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. That our ancestors didn't work for free, we didn't work underpaid, we didn't get all this slavery, America or no one else. White Western civilization isn't getting that for free. And we need our reparations. So African people, when we come down here, and most African people are scared to come down here. That's why you don't see, we have a lot of problems in the hood, but most African people won't even come down here, period. Why? Because they're afraid. They're simply afraid. They're afraid of government. They're afraid of the police. They're afraid of getting kicked out of their homes. They're afraid of everything. People are afraid of everything. They're afraid. They're 100% terrified. And that terror just leads mostly African people to all kind of craziness. Alcoholism, drug addiction, miseducation. We're not being educated, nothing. The system does absolutely, positively nothing for us. And sitting on trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. That's our dollars. San Francisco say $5 million per person. Real dollars, not inflated dollars. And we need part of that money. Black people, when we come down here, we have to talk about reparations. That's the only thing we have to talk about, reparations. All that other stuff don't matter. White people owe us, and they have to pay us. Plain and simple. We're not talking about speed bumps. We're not talking about loud music. We're not talking about parks and recreation. We're not talking about Martin Luther King holidays and Juneteenth or none of that ignorant stuff. We're talking about white people owe us individually millions of dollars in reparations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I said good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Right. My name is Pastor William, Paradise Missionary Baptist Church, 1112 East Scott Street. And I'm grateful to God to be here to see another day. I want to read some scriptures to y'all, but I know y'all don't want to hear them, but for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believe in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. I just thank God for this day. And it's a blessing for all of us. Not just me because I believe in Jesus Christ, but for all of us. You know, I was listening at TV the other night, and Ukraine begging for us to help them. And we telling them that we're going to send them $66 million. They don't need no money to fight for them. They need some bodies. Come over there and help them out. But we sit back like, well, they ain't killing me, so that's the way it ought to be. No. We need to go and defend them people. And people don't have no weapon to fight with. And yet we sit back here talking about what we done did. We ain't did nothing. We got the Navy, got the Army, got the Air Force, got the National Guard, and won't send nobody over there to help them people out. And that's the way y'all treat us here in Tampa anyway, black people. We don't want to do nothing to help us out either. But we praying to Almighty God that God will intervene and do what he need to do. And whatever he need to do, he got to do it. Can't nobody tell him he can't do it. He do it when he get ready. And we must praise him and glorify him at all times. I know people that don't like me because I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, but it makes me no different. I'm going to be a believer more so now than I ever have been in my whole life. I know I'm not what God wants me to be, but I'm trying to get there. And I thank God for sparing my life, that I'll be able one day to get another year over. I praise him and glorify him everywhere I go. I had a letter I want to bring up here, but if y'all going to have a meeting next week, I'll make sure I have that with me to pray, to let people know exactly what we're all about. We're not about people's color. We're about people, what people believe, and that's what it's all about. And I believe in Jesus Christ to the fullness of my heart, whether you think so or not. And you know what? We got to learn to respect each other, regardless of what color they are. In Jesus' holy name, amen.
Thank you.
I know they don't want to hear that. Hey, how you doing?
All right, how you doing?
You good?
I'm good.
You
good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you.
Glad to see you too.
God bless you, yeah.
Do we have anyone else in chambers that wishes to speak to public comment?
What do you say?
I just asked if there was anybody else in chambers that wanted to speak at public comment.
You want to go?
Do we have anyone online?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I don't know people that are in here.
Sorry, I don't have any names up here, Madam
Mr.
Clerk.
Randolph? Mr. Randolph, can you please unmute yourself and speak?
Michael Randolph, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
my
sir.
name is Michael Randolph, and I'm with the West Tampa Community Development Corporation. what's unique about the day is that I'll be speaking during this meeting, and I also will be speaking during the evening meeting. The focus that I'll be talking about is the community benefit agreement, which I think is going to be one of the first of a kind in the nation, in that it was designed by the community that sat at the table to create its own deal. There are 4 key components to this that I'll talk about today. Later on this evening, I'll talk about the numbers. The first key component is that it reduces gentrification intentionally and by design. The other thing it does is to reduce crime by providing opportunity for those who are part of the criminal justice system. It creates generational wealth in that it provides people with an opportunity to start their own business that adds supplemental income as well as full-time income. And finally, it reduces the technological gap in the community. As you know, 45% of residents in West Tampa live below the poverty level. Every night, they go to bed wondering whether or not they'll be displaced by the new development that's going on. Our program intentionally and by design makes sure that we reduce gentrification. Think about the mother that's been working for years, 3 kids, paying rent, and now the rent is going up, she can't afford it. Our program provides supplemental income for her to be able to do it. It also focuses on those with criminal records, the disabled, senior citizens, and at-risk youth. I'm happy to be part of the team that you'll be meeting tonight to say that what we're doing here is to show that we can reduce gentrification and have redevelopment at the same time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Randolph. All right, at this time we'll have the agenda review. Agenda item number 1, Councilman Vieira, this is yours.
Yes, sir.
Are we still hearing this?
Yes, and if I may?
Yes, sir, Councilman Vieira.
Yeah, it's funny because we often say in city council that there are staff reports that should be workshops. Well, I have 2 workshops here that probably should be staff reports, so I don't anticipate these going very long for purposes of workshop, but just wanted to note the irony, but yes, sir.
Okay, agenda item number 2. Mr. Bede has asked that this be continued until April 27th.
Move to second.
We have a motion to continue this from Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor? Any objections? Motion carries. Agenda item number 3, Councilman Vieira again. We'll go forward with it. Agenda item number 4, Councilman Carlson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe that clears up our agenda review. Martin, Mr. Shelby.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney. Just a reminder, Council, and it appears on your agenda at 11 o'clock, where the administration is going to be, and I'll be requesting a hard stop for a closed session, and as it is listed on the agenda, and we will discuss that at the time. If for whatever reason Council is done with this agenda, I would ask that you take a recess till 11 o'clock and then reconvene here to go announce to go into closed session. But if you could see in front of you that each of the council members are included, so I'd ask that you remain for that, if you please do, for the discussion. And when we go into closed session, what you do then is you would go up to the location of it, which would be on the 8th floor of Old City Hall and in the conference room. And then we go immediately into the closed session as soon as we can, and then return back here, and then we reconvene to close out that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. First agenda item number, file number CM 22-75606. Yes, Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much. And Raquel, before you go, I just wanted to thank you for everything, because you always you are such a wonderful asset to our city with the many hats you wear within the disability community. I mean, we're always together on things, and I think you do a great job. So I just wanted to say thank you. And so we've spoken about this before. The reason I brought this up is the Tampa Bay area has, I believe, the 3rd highest the concentration of people who are deaf or hard of hearing within our United States. So I wanted to see what, if any, city services could be improved on this. I was requested to do this by our friend Mr. D.C. Gustafus, who's such a nice gentleman and whatnot. And so I just before wanted to thank you for your work and all your diligent efforts. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I also want to thank Council for all of their support for access for persons with disabilities in our community. I know our community members feel the support daily. They really appreciate all of your leadership, and especially Councilman Vieira's leadership in the community. I hear frequently from community members about the gratitude they have for each of you for the acknowledgement of access for persons with disabilities and the importance of it. So I wanted to first share, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak about how the city is serving and making sure that persons who have hearing disabilities, who are deaf and hard of hearing, have access to our city services. So one of the major requirements under the Americans with Disabilities Act is that we actually have an ADA notice. This provides individuals with an opportunity to request accommodations as they need it. So the City of Tampa actually has an ADA statement that should be placed on all of our meeting notifications, our public event notifications, so that persons with disabilities actually have an opportunity to request accommodations if they might need that. So for example, that might be for individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, might need American Sign Language interpreting services or captioning services. So there's a mechanism for them to request it. Also, too, with effective communication, we do have contractors available for American Sign Language interpreting services. Those have been secured and in place. And we also have agencies that provide the captioning services. You'll notice our city council meetings are always captions with the thanks for TNI to arrange those. The City of Tampa also receives a lot of accolades in regards to our efforts during emergency preparedness and disaster preparedness to make sure community members who are deaf, who use American Sign Language, actually understand the messages that our emergency management team and Mayor Castor is sharing. I'm very grateful for our communications and marketing team and that they allow me to be able to coordinate American Sign Language interpreting. When I hear from the community, I often hear that this is not a common or a service that's provided, and many individuals in other locations often feel at a disadvantage because they're not readily understanding what is happening during those emergency events. So they're very grateful for our city efforts in that way. Some of our best practices that we do is we actually have an advisory council with the Tampa Mayor's Alliance for Persons with Disabilities, and these are comprised of individuals who have varying disabilities. And I also actively participate in the Hillsborough County Alliance for Citizens with Disabilities. Both groups actually comprised of persons with disabilities, local agency providers. I continuously seek feedback from them on how we might be able to improve our services. In fact, have recently outreached to several community members as well as USF who are deaf and hard of hearing about a project with the Tampa Police Department in regards to communication cards. I'm hoping that these communication cards might be able to facilitate communication with individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing. In addition to that, TPD and Fire Rescue currently have in place the Special Needs Registry. You may have seen about this. I think about 2 years ago it was actually launched. Last year, I lose track of my time, they also initiated a program where community members can receive stickers that they can place either on their front-facing window or inside their home or on their vehicle to alert first responders to know that they may have a disability. For example, a person who's deaf and hard of hearing, an individual has Alzheimer's or dementia, people who are autistic and have special needs, and individuals who are diabetic. So these can also be the notifications to our first responders to let them know that there's an individual who either is in the vehicle or resides in the home that might have some communication limitations and being able to interact with the first responders. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Councilman Vieira.
And thank you very much for that. And again, this is because of the great work that the City of Tampa is doing. This is more like a staff report, so thank you very much for that. Let me ask you, with regards to first responders with police and fire, do you think that is there maybe room for more training whenever it comes to maybe identifying people?
Yes, so I know for a fact that new fire rescue recruits actually receive ADA training. I was actually just out there yesterday with the new fire rescue recruits. I believe also new TPD employees also have an ADA training that they go through. It's a virtual training that they do that's self-paced. And city staff, just in general, all new city staff members, I also do an ADA training with them. And the ADA training actually covers not only individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, but serving our community members who have a variety of types of disabilities so that we can be equipped to make sure that we're responding respectively and effectively during those interactions.
Great. And it seems to me from from what I've seen that the Buckhorn administration's autism sensory friendly, Tampa autism friendly program seemed to have a trickle down effect on other areas of disabilities with the city becoming more cognizant of it. And this appears to be one of them, which is obviously a wonderful thing. So actually it's funny. I have no further questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity for me to share.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I wanted to say thank you for this as well. I think this is absolutely fabulous. It's good to see that we're always continuing to find room for improvement and ways to expand. And so it sounds like we're doing a wonderful job. So my only question is, what are your plans in the future? Like, what are we doing to either reach out to more, or are there other initiatives that you would like to go forward with that we as a council can help?
Excellent. So, and thank you, Councilman. So typically the plans always are to continue to self-evaluate, to make sure that we are looking at all of our processes. I try to embed myself in regards to any new projects that are happening with the city of Tampa, pose questions in regards to how access for persons with disabilities are actually being considered. I have a wonderful job because all of our city colleagues are very receptive to when I'm posing the questions, and usually have a solution-focused approach to the efforts that we're trying to do. I always think it's very important to hear from the community, so I continue to involve myself in actual meetings within the community, outreaching to various community members. One area that I would like to do, and I actually spoke with Councilman Vieira about this, we currently do not have a person on the Mayor's Alliance for Persons with Disabilities who is either deaf or hard of hearing. When we initially did outreach, we actually did try to focus and pointed the application process to several community members to try to make sure that we do the recruitment, but some of the individuals that we had targeted actually had a lot of commitments professionally with their work, and we're finding it difficult to extend themselves for another committee. But I certainly will, that's going to be one of the goals, is to, when we do the next application, to make sure that we're looking at who's currently serving and trying to see who is not represented on the Mayor's Alliance, or a disability category that's not represented.
Thank you. I love to see that we're continuing to work to include everyone, and thank you again for all the work you're doing. It's wonderful to hear how the staff is so responsive. And again, like Mr. Vieira said, anything we can do to help.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for your support.
Councilman Maniscalco.
I just want to say thank you. You know, I want to make sure that the city is always thinking about being inclusive and welcoming to everyone, and I think you're doing that. You, your team, you know, the people that we recruit, and we keep the focus on that as we move forward, and as the city continues to grow. You know, I mean, we have people from all walks of life, and again, we want them to feel welcomed here. So,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Anyone else?
If I may, make a comment, which is the fact that this is such a small, short workshop shows what a great job you're doing. So I mean that. So just thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have my regards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councilman.
Next agenda item is file number CM 22-78305. I'm sorry. Does anybody in chambers wish to speak to agenda item number 1? Seeing none, agenda item number 3, file number CM 22-78305.
Good morning. Justin Vasky, Senior Assistant City Attorney. This is with regards to item 3 on the agenda. And as a reminder, legal staff asked us to research the possibility of an ordinance for the City Council Charter Amendment to be patterned after the 27th Amendment, where pay increases do not take effect until after an election. In my research, I found that this has been done by city council resolution as opposed to a charter amendment or an ordinance. For example, on May 26, 2005, city council approved a resolution that set the salary of city council members and then authorized annual increases in salary equal to the across-the-board salary increases provided to managerial employees, and then had a cap at 3%. So in terms of this resolution from 2005, the effective date was 2 years later. It was April 1st, 2007. So we've done this historically by resolution. So in short, if you wish to set the salary of council members for the next city council, this can be done by resolution. That is all.
Councilman Vieira.
And thank you very much. And yeah, and so just to be clear in terms of what I was looking at is I originally wanted to have a charter amendment for this, but then I found out that we could do it by ordinance, right? And my intent was, regardless of whatever city council does with their pay, with pay now or in the future, is that so it takes effect after an election, just like the 27th Amendment of the Constitution, which says if the Congress raises their salary outside of cost of living adjustments, which you said, because that's not inflation, that's post-inflation, pre-inflation adjustment, that it takes place after an election. That's it. And so again, this is a staff report. This is not really something for a workshop, but I think this is something that is good government, which is if city council raises its salary outside of the 3% inflation, that it should take effect after an election, just like we have for Congress. I think it's simple. I think it's common sense. I think it's good government and transparent, and that's it.
Anyone else? Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I remember the whole thing, and I'm here going by memory, I don't have any papers in front of me how it started or what it was based on Miami, St. Petersburg, and Orlando. And if I recall, one was 58, one was 54, and we were at 53 or something like that. And I don't know where this came from. I don't know. I'm not against raises, but I am very concerned about a 42% raise. And that's what it amounts to, just about. It's from 53 to 72. And I certainly didn't do that. If you ask anyone in the city of Tampa, anyone who has been an employee anywhere, I don't think anyone's ever gotten a 42% raise increase. Or if you ask any employer, when they were working, did they get a 42% increase? And those are the things that just I don't sit well with. I'm not opposed to the same thing that happens to the general employees. We're no better or no worse than anyone. We're fortunate enough to lead the city and make it better at times than someone else did before us. So those are the things that I'm looking at. And then there's another question which I'm going to see how much I can find. I don't know where this came from. I don't want finger pointing from the administration out of council, the council from the administration, or a combination of both. But I'd really like to find out, if you can, who started this?
Me.
I understand me. Thank you very much for being me. But the 72%, me had to have somebody bring it to somebody else then. And I want to know where that trail leads to.
Well, the scope of my research was just for the motion here, so I don't have those answers.
Thank you.
Councilman Vieira.
Yes, and I want to be clear, this is no relevancy whatsoever to proposed salary increases, et cetera, that this is just for saying that in the future, whenever city council raises its salary outside of inflation adjustment, that it takes place after election. That's it. I mean, and again, council members can speak whatever they want to, God bless them, et cetera. However, just in terms of my intent for this, it's very narrowly tailored and whatnot to this issue. And that's all. Thank you.
Anyone else on council? Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, this discussion, as my colleague just said, was just about making sure that any raise would come after an election. But on the idea of raises, clearly the administration during the budget hearing proposed publicly that city council get a raise. It was not something proposed by city council. After the fact, they said that Dingfelder had requested it, but he had been gone from city council for months, and so that was not a good excuse. we found out later that it was a setup because it was in mailers. I had like three, I don't know if you guys had it, I had like 3 mailers against me talking about it. And again, to whoever had this idea, you failed because I won by 20%, and the public didn't care. So what the public wants is good government, transparent government, and they want balance of powers. And I had someone worth $300-something million run against me because most professionals cannot give up their jobs, give up their day jobs. This really is a full-time job. Most people can't give up their day jobs to work in an office like this. I'm not going to run for city council in 4 years. I've already said that. I want in the next couple years to have some kind of structure that will pay city council members a better living wage in the future. There needs to be an apparatus. It doesn't have to be a certain percentage increase or anything like that, but there needs to be a certain apparatus. Frankly, most of the other city council members in the state are paid too little as well. I lived in Singapore 5 years where they believe in fighting against corruption by paying people well. It's obviously if the administration worked with campaign people to send out 3 mailers against me and it had no impact, it's not a political issue. It creates noise, it's political noise, but it's not an issue. And I agree that we shouldn't give ourselves raises, but we're not going to get the best and brightest people to run for city council in the future if we don't pay a decent wage. And it's also not fair that the mayor gets paid a huge amount of money. And if we ever pass something, it's not going to impact me because I'm not going to be on city council in 4 years. But we need to do something about this to make sure that we have good governance in the future. Nobody's going to give up their business or their high-paying job to earn $53,000. And 2 other things related to that. What people may not realize is that city council members get invited to events all the time, and we have a choice. We can either file an ethics form saying that we accepted a big gift, or we pay them back. I pay people back. So somebody offers me a ticket, if it's $300 or whatever, I pay them back. I don't let people give me gifts above $100. If you're only earning $53,000 a year, you can't afford to do that. And I'm asking the public, would you rather your city council member be able to reimburse somebody for a ticket or get a free ticket, even if they disclose it? My proposal is they get paid enough that they can afford to pay for the ticket themselves. We shouldn't have people having to accept that. The other thing is that, and we're going to discuss this in the next item, I've spent more than $25,000 on legal fees in the last year and a half, not defending myself, but answering subpoenas and frivolous lawsuits regarding other people. And the city attorney's office still is disputing some of the payments on that. And you need to think about if I get paid $53,000 and I spent $25,000 on legal fees, half, and that's before taxes, by the way, more than half my after-tax salary went to paying legal fees, answering other people's subpoenas. This is a very dangerous, volatile job with all the really nasty, dirty politics going on right now. The politics have gotten worse in the last few days than I've ever seen in my life. This is serious third world stuff that's going on in Tampa right now. And I don't know who exactly is behind it. Hopefully we'll have investigative powers to figure it out at some point. But considering everything that's going on, it's a very dangerous position. Do you want somebody who, you're either going to get a choice where you're going to have somebody who's worth millions and millions of dollars that may not represent your interests, or you'll get somebody who is earning so little that they'll take gifts from people and they'll be vulnerable to pressure or threat of a lawsuit. And if you're threatened by a lawsuit and you can't afford to pay to defend yourself, the only thing you can do is give in and be swayed by the people who are threatening you. We need people who can stand up to threats and pay themselves, and we need people who won't take gifts. And so I think, I'm not proposing anything right now, but we need some structure that will affect the next city council in 4 years that will protect the integrity of city council so that we have independence and a balance of powers in the future. Thank you.
Councilman Goods.
I mean, in all fairness, I respect everybody on the council. But anyone can go back and look at the tapes of when all this came about. The citizens came and spoke about how we're underpaid. There were no council members talked about we were underpaid. The citizens talked about that. And then after they talked about it so much, I believe Mr. Dingfelder then said, oh, have Mr. Bennett look into what other cities make. That's what happened. What do other cities make? And then all of a sudden the administration came back, and now we know it was a setup. what do other cities make? And we come back that we're under the radar. So how can we be a major city and other people are making more money than a council is making? And what upsets me is this, is that, you know, we infect politics so much, it's just become unreal, the things that people are doing. So people won't be reelected, the things that people say, the lawsuits, the intimidation tactics that have been going on. It's just unreal. And you can't try to be a good council member and be driving all over in your district trying to go to events and see, gas is high. Gas is high. And so if you a person who just really wants to serve, but you know you barely meet your AMI like any other regular citizen, but you got to go to events. So it means you got to drive, you got to spend gas money. You know, Mr. Carlson talked about, you know, you have to pay for things sometimes if you don't, you know, want to report. There's a lot of things that come along with this job. And, you know, for many years, people say it was a part-time job. Then I asked one day, well, was the charter said it's a part-time job? There's nothing that charter says it's a part-time job. But you're asked to do so much, but get so little. And I just think that you have to stay above the radar and be able to be equal to everybody else. You can't be under because we're Tampa, because we don't want to, you know, election here. We don't want people to think we're at. No, the citizens didn't complain or come here and say, you guys shouldn't get a raise. They didn't say any of that. None of that. Didn't hear any of that the whole time that was going on. It's not a matter, you know, all respect, it's not a matter of 42%. I think it's a matter of bringing it up to the same level as every one of the other cities. But again, you know, everyone has their own opinion. That's what this country is made of. Individuals have their own opinion. I just think that when you look at when people don't want to serve, you want the best people trying to serve, but you don't want them to go broke trying to serve. You don't want to go broke trying to serve. And I think, you know, you look at what the economy is, things have risen. So if you're a councilman who's renting, where are you going to get the extra money from? Rent's going up. So, I mean, we want to be fair to everybody, but I think we also have to be logical to say, okay, we want to stay even with everybody else to where we're not losing, you know, our livelihoods. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Miranda.
Not to explore anything else, but again, I don't know of any council member in any city that makes $72,000. Maybe there is, because I haven't checked. But when you say you compare something to something else, and the highest one that I saw was $58,000, and I forget if it was St. Pete or Orlando or Miami, one of the three. And when you do that to 72, that's $14,000 more than the highest one was ever getting paid. And it's not about money, it's about service. And let me tell you another thing. I've heard about buying tickets here, buying tickets there. Well, guess what? That's also what they give you every month. I don't know what it is, $250, $230, $260. I don't know what it is because I've never taken it. So every 4 years, whatever's in that money, I tell the city to donate it to anyone they want, to affordable housing, to whatever it is. Not in my name. I leave it right where it's at. So it's not, I'm not trying to pat myself in the back. I don't do that. But I'm just telling you the facts. I'm 28 years old backwards. I work 7 days a week. And I'm here as much or more than anyone else. And if you don't believe me, I'll put cameras in the hallway, show you what's happening. So these are and I'm not casting aspiration. I'm not saying they're not coming to work. Let me clarify that. But for having 7 days a week job for 7 months out of the year, and again, I'm not bagging on myself. I'm just telling you the facts. Somebody started this, and I'm going to find out how it came about, and I'm going to write them a letter. That's all. Thank you.
Well, no, I'll close it, but go ahead. No, go ahead.
I mean, I was just going to, and again, I want to be very clear. This is something that is very, very, very narrowly tailored. It does not preclude a future city council from having a salary increase of any kind. It just simply says that outside of an inflation adjustment, if we do ever in the future raise our salary, that it would go over to another city council, because we shouldn't do that before, or take the benefit of that before an election, just like the 27th Amendment says for Congress, et cetera. So again, this, everybody who has spoken here, I really, really respect everybody's opinions and experiences, et cetera, on this. There's a lot of issues that have been discussed, et cetera, but this is something that's very, very narrowly tailored. So I want to make a motion whenever the time comes, just to have this come back to us, however long you need, if council approves it, in ordinance form for our consideration. And that's all.
If may I inquire?
Mr. Shelby.
Yes, thank you. I believe Mr. Vasky talked about a resolution, and you are talking about an ordinance.
Oh, okay.
No, but I just want to be clear, because, and just so you know, if you could refresh my recollection based on what you said, the resolution that council did in 2005.
And it set a salary and had annual increases.
And annual increases, and it turns out that I was the one who drafted it at council's motion in 2005. So that, refreshing my recollection, what was the difference in time at that point from the time they passed that resolution till the time of the election?
2 years.
2 years, okay. And just a reminder that with regard to a resolution can be, it can be changed very easily by another resolution, withdrawing it, repealing it or superseding it, or however you want to do it. That's one thing. With regard to an ordinance, it requires 2 readings, and a public hearing and the like. But it normally is done by resolution. And again, a council, the way it would be set up, could change its mind, just so you know that. And I've said this before with other things, just so you know, just so that you're clear. But it's council's pleasure that if the particular council, when this resolution passes, is committing to doing that, that's council's choice. In other words, council, just as when they said that, it's been on the books since 2005.
Yes.
So it's council's pleasure whether you want to do it by resolution or whether you want to.
Sure. I mean, may I? Sure. I mean, and again, I don't want this to disturb anything with regards to inflation adjustments. That would be ridiculous. I'm talking about with non-inflation adjustment salary increases. Very, very narrowly tailored. That's it. And if it's resolution, ordinance, we got to say 12 Hail Marys and 8 Our Fathers to get it done. I don't care. Just however we got to get it done. That's it.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, I just want to say for anybody watching, the pay increase that Councilmember Miranda was discussing was not one presented by City Council or suggested by City Council. It was presented by the Chief of Staff during the budget presentation. The mayor was not able to be here for the annual budget presentation, so the city Chief of Staff in her place presented it. It was a proposal of the administration, not of City Council, and we were asked to vote on the budget, which originally at least included that. So this City Council anyway did not even bring up the idea. To the idea that Councilmember Vieira has about making sure that a City Council can't raise their own salaries, I think it should be, you mentioned a 27th or whatever amendment, I think it should be a charter amendment. And I also think that a charter amendment should set some kind of apparatus. I had proposed in the day when all of my proposals were rejected, one of them was to have an outside third-party committee set up to analyze the mayor's salary and the city council's salary and set it every 5 years or so. It still would have to be voted on by city council, I think, but depending on how we set it up. But there needs to be some kind of third-party objective apparatus, so it's not just elected officials ingratiating themselves, but at least to the narrow part of city council members not raising their own salaries and only raising it for the next city council. I think that should be a charter amendment. A resolution or an ordinance are too easy to change. Thank you.
Mr. Shelby.
Yes, one last question. That ordinance is, that resolution, as I recall, was for the purpose of the salary adjustment, and then it had an effective date of putting that salary adjustment into place.
Right, so once again, it set a salary that was different than previously, then put in place the salary increases.
So I want to know, I guess, if you give direction to come back, would it include the salary increase as the one in 2005 did with the effective date till after the election, as this one did? Or are you wanting to create a policy by resolution or ordinance that would just remain in effect?
I do not want to disturb the 2005 resolution. I merely want to say that if city council raises its salary again beyond that 2005 resolution authority that goes every single year, that it goes to the next council. That is it. Eso es todo. That's it. And again, and by the way, with regards to what Councilman Carlson said, I actually agree. I would have liked for it to have been a charter amendment. However, I did take the position that if we can do something via ordinance or resolution, et cetera, as opposed to a charter amendment, that we should do that. So that's why we're here. But I do agree that it is something that is structural that would probably be better in the charter. However, we can deal with that at a later time. But those comments are well taken.
Is there anyone in chambers that wishes to speak to this?
Good morning, somebody's glasses. Stephanie Pointer. Mr. Miranda, Councilman Miranda, you've asked several times who started this. That would be me. I submitted it to Chief Bennett 2 years ago. I don't remember all the numbers, but we pulled the numbers for the closest cities. We pulled the numbers for the staff. I have sent you guys the email at least 2 or 3 times about this. So when you want to know who started this, that would be me. I did the research. I took the top 5 staff members for every department. I added them all up. I averaged them all out with the exception of legal because they make more money. But then I cut it in half. And that's where the $72,000 came from. Half of what the staff members make, the administrators make. I'd like to point out, now, the discussion is, oh, we don't need to have a 42% raise. Well, we gave the city of Tampa employees an 18% raise. That would raise you to $61,000 a year. Every contract that I've seen come through with a renewal with a cost of living increase on it was 8.5%. That's our increase. Why do those seats up there have to take a vow of poverty for this job? And nobody is starving to death, but we've all seen everybody's financials in the last 3 months because they were publicized, and there's no reason not to. We have folks who would like to run for council who are not well established in their lives. And I'm sorry, Councilman Miranda, you've lived in your house since 1974. I was 4 years old. 1964, okay. So the tax records only go back to 74. So long before I was born. I'm no spring chicken. So no, you don't need the money, but you also don't have to take the money, period. Councilman Carlson has said he would not take the raise. You could vote on this today and give the next council a raise. 4 of you are already elected or not. And go ahead and do this for the next city council so that they can make a living wage, so that they don't qualify for affordable housing if they don't have another job. We've got a 25% increase in our population. This job gets more and more cumbersome every year because of that. And, reality is that it's just very frustrating because I see some very, very good neighborhood leaders who would love to run for city council, but they can't because they would lose their income, which means they wouldn't be able to pay their rent or their house payment, and they would have to take a cut in salary. And there are folks who are still in the race for council who will lose part of their salary to do so. Vote for it.
Council members, I decided after 16 years of being on various boards, committees, and commissions that I was lucky enough to have a profession that would afford me time to do that. To run for office. Because I did care about the city. Now, I spend 35 hours a week here. Sometimes when there's tumbleweeds blowing across the 3rd floor of City Hall. But I also spend 35 hours a week at my other job. I ran for office because I care about this city. Not because how much money I made. And it would have been very easy for me to take a 42% raise. That would have cured all my financial problems. So that nasty mailers about me that went out full of falsehoods and half-truths would not have been done. Does this council deserve a raise? Maybe. To the point of 42%? I don't know. Again, I paid for everything that was given to me because I worked 2 jobs. And I think I know of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 council members that work 2 jobs. Brightest and the best. I think we got the brightest and the best now. And I think there's some people out there that are running for office are the brightest and the best, but they also have another job. Thank you, council members. Agenda.
And may I make that motion?
If you would like to, yes.
Thank you. No, just to have this come back to us for our consideration, and if council passes it, how much time? 2 months, 3 months? What are y'all? That's a good question. A charter amendment, I don't think we can do. I mean, I don't want to go there. Just a resolution.
Well, let me just say this, as somebody who did that resolution in 2005, if council wishes to do it that way, it worked then. That was the brought to your attention by staff. The thing is that certainly whenever it comes back, that'll have to be considered by the council who is going to be considering it at the time, the new term. Mm-hmm. So if council wishes, I'm able to draft that resolution. Certainly, we know it exists. I don't know if Mr. Vasky wants to do it, but certainly I can work with council if you wish. Mr. Vasky.
Justin Vasky, Assistant City Attorney. Remember, I need a number. Okay, so when you set the salary, you can ask me to make a resolution, but I need a number.
If I may ask, Councilman Rivera, that will go into effect May 5th.
Yeah, but I'm not setting anyone's salary with this. This is simply something.
But again, it is going in effect after the election. So yes, Councilman Carlson and the rest of the people that are elected, their increase will go up. So it will affect the next council.
If it's
I think there is some confusion here, okay? I'm not talking about inflation adjustments. I'm saying that if we raise our salary above that, then it goes, if this body does so, then it goes to the next council, okay? That's it. That's all that I'm asking in this. I'm not asking for the 2005 resolution to be disturbed in terms of the dictates, just that if we go beyond that, right, beyond the inflation adjustment up to 3%, that it takes effect for the following city council, just like the 27th Amendment. That's it.
So if I understand you correctly, what you're looking to do, because you could do that now, but you'd be binding a future council.
Let's have it for next council's consideration.
For the next council's consideration.
Absolutely.
So then what that council will do when that's up for their consideration is, assuming it passes, they will have voluntarily made the decision that they will not consider a raise for the remainder of their term, other than what has been already set forth at 3% or whatever that is.
Yeah, and that does not disturb that. I want to be very clear.
Mm-hmm. Is that
Councilman Carlson?
Yeah, we were criticized because the charter amendment discussion and votes were so late, that was actually a staff issue also because it kept getting delayed, although we were blamed for it. But now we're 2 years out from the presidential election. We could vote now and start the process of creating an ordinance that would put a charter amendment on the ballot in, what is that, 2024, whatever, whenever it is. We're only 18 months out. So we got criticized for going late. If we started early, it seems to make sense. All it would say, it wouldn't talk about any numbers. All it would say is that any increase in raise other than cost of living could only be approved to impact the next council, not whatever council is sitting. That's all it would say, right?
And after, if I may.
Councilman Vieira.
Yes, sir. And again, I would not oppose that, but I do suggest that we get the ball rolling with resolution, and then we can have a fuller discussion on that in the next council.
Justin Vasky, Assistant City Attorney. You know, the cleanest way to do this would be an ordinance.
Then let's do an ordinance.
Well, okay.
Ms. Zellman.
I'm sorry. I just want, both Justin and I are frustrated. I think what we're talking about are two different things. A resolution would be the method to increase everyone's salary. If what Councilman Vieira is asking for is basically something that governs the city council and says, if you pass a resolution increasing the salary, it must go into effect in the next term. Or, you know, obviously we could say it more artfully. So that's what Justin's saying, that if that's what you want, we do it by ordinance.
Okay,
If you
then-
want to
okay,
do a
I'm glad
salary increase now that would go into effect later, you do that by resolution.
Okay, if
You
I
don't
may.
need an ordinance saying it. You always have the option to do that, but if you want to carve it in stone that it has to be done that way, then you do an ordinance, right? That's
Right.
what.
Okay, may I, sir?
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you. And I think there was some confusion. Yes, that is what I want. So I will then amend my motion to make that an ordinance for the following council's consideration, and we can have it we're in March, when everybody's well settled in July. Give them 4 months. Yeah, that's fine.
We have a motion made by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Carlson. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any against?
Nay.
Nay.
Roll call.
Roll call vote, please.
Carlson?
Yes.
Goods?
Yeah.
Vieira?
Yes.
Maniscalco?
No.
Miranda?
No.
Hurtak?
Yes.
Citro?
No.
Motion passed with Maniscalco, Miranda, and Citro voting no.
And do we have a date for that, please? Did you pick a date, Madam Clerk? Sir, July? Let me get the calendar.
Sure. Councilman Vieira, this is your motion.
The last week in July, just to put the most time possible.
That would be a workshop.
Okay, then yeah, we don't want to.
Oh, wait a second, we may not have a workshop in July. Hold on a second.
It's 27th, council regular session.
27th, council regular
That's
session.
good with me. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Councilman Goods.
I hope that Mr. Carlson in the future will make the motion as it relates to a structure. That way we don't have to worry about the political fallout or who's afraid to vote on money and issues. So hopefully you'll get the support the next council to put a motion on the floor to put a mechanism in place in the charter so you don't have to worry about these discussions going forward in the future. Thank you.
Councilman Carlson.
I wonder, considering all the confusion just now, number one, I want anybody watching in public to know that all we voted on was a proposed ordinance that would limit any existing city council from raising their own salary. That's what we voted on. So number two, when it comes back, would it be prudent, because of the confusion, would it be prudent to ask the clerk to put a note in that says specifically, this is not a discussion about raising salaries. It's only a prohibition against a current council from raising their own salaries.
The maker of the motion, the way council, I don't know how you stated it for the purposes of the clerk, but if you could phrase the motion, because I think it was framed very well.
I can gladly do that. So again, to restate the motion, I restate the motion, which is to come back on July 27th, I believe it was, with a proposed ordinance for consideration by City Council that would preclude a City Council from raising their own salary beyond the adjustment, the inflation adjustment. And I incorporate Councilman Carlson's suggestions, wherein he stated that we put on the notice for the agenda for the public that this is not about us raising our salary.
Well, we have a motion by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Carlson. Any further discussion? Councilman Miranda.
No discussion, really. I'm just looking at it, and it's been so convoluted now for the public to understand that I'm laughing at myself, because any ordinance and any council coming after us by ordinance can supersede any ordinance that we write. So the moot question is moot, because they can do whatever they want. So let's face reality. Let's be realistic about the things. And it happens all the time for different reasons, for whatever. So if you really want to do something, then you have that council put it, or this council put it, at some election date of future councils in the charter. Let them vote for it, then it's codified in the charter. That's the only way you're going to solve it. Don't give it to another electric body. They can do whatever the hell they want with it. And I'm sorry I said the word hell. I should have said H-E double hockey sticks. But those are the things that are going on. You can't fool society day in and day out, and we're not trying to fool society. But we have so many things on the table going this way and this way, they don't know. I mean, it's a little confusing, to say the least. So that's all I'm saying. If you really want to do something, have the future council put it on the charter for a vote. And therefore, the public votes on it, not the 7 or 8 elected officials of this city or any other city that's going to be here. That's why everybody knows that everything is codified by the electric people who go vote.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, Councilmember Miranda just said in a different way the same thing I was saying, that it should be a charter amendment, and because any ordinance, any other city council can change. I don't know if the folks who voted no would vote yes if it was a charter amendment, but if we had the votes now, I might ask my colleague to restate the motion for a third time. But if not, I would ask him to talk to legal and come back in July and propose a charter amendment instead. I think despite spending $200,000 against the charter amendments, 3 of them passed, and this one would probably get 90 to 100% of the vote, because most people would be in favor of not having a city council raise their own salaries. So I think this is a no-lose situation for us if we made it a charter amendment.
And I'm not an expert in politics, but when you look at the way you put these items, and not us, that's the way it's structured, yes or no, people don't like to vote negative. They like to vote in a positive way, the general public. That's my take on it. So when you put a subject that's yes for this and no for this, the yes is going to get the majority. But if you get the same one and you put it up here for yes, and you switch it around, it's going to pass, because people like to vote positive. They don't like to vote negative. They don't like to listen to negative news. They don't like to listen. There's enough negative things in this world that maybe that's what's causing this civilization to go half wacko, because everything is negative. So when you look at the charter, you look at the yes and no's, I would imagine that 95% of the yes will pass, and a whole, not on 1 or 2 subject matters, and the no's would fail. That's my take on it.
Councilor Vieira.
And I'm glad to discuss that, Councilman Carlson, with city staff. I mean, again, I actually wanted this to be an ordinance, or strike that, to be a charter amendment. And we can look at that when we go for our next election, even year election, 110% supportive of that. I say we get what we can right now. And with regards to an ordinance, I mean, city council can override any ordinance. We pass a ton of ordinances and they can all be overridden, but there's a process and whatnot for that. So I say we get what we can today on an idea that I think, as has been said, has 90% probably approval in the city of Tampa, if not the state of Florida, and then look at a charter amendment, which I'll be gladly talking to legal about that. So thank you very much, Council.
All right. Do we still have a motion on the floor? Yes, Councilman Carlson, Councilman Vieira, second by Councilman Carlson.
Okay, yes.
As the amended motion, correct? Amended. Let's do a roll call vote on it, please.
Yeah, read it for the public. It's confusing, if I may ask.
Yes, please.
Okay. Gosh, okay. My motion was to have City of Tampa Legal come back with a draft ordinance that would preclude any future city council from being allowed to raise their own salary beyond what the 2005 resolution on the 3% says. And also to have the agenda, this is the only part that's amended, to have the agenda for that date in July 27th reflect that this is not consideration of a salary increase by city council. And that's it.
Again, motion made by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Carlson. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Goods,
I want to vote no this time. I think it needs to be a charter amendment, so I'm going to vote no this time.
Vieira,
Yes.
Maniscalco,
No.
Miranda,
No.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Carlson, Citro,
No.
What was the vote?
Councilman
I'm sorry,
Vieira.
I'm sorry, could you see what the roll call was, please?
motion failed with Goods, Maniscalco, Miranda, and Citro voting no.
Councilman Vieira.
So, Mr. Shelby, we did pass the motion without the clarification, so is that 4-3 vote still in effect?
Yeah.
Because that's what I
Well,
thought.
It was a motion to amend.
Okay.
As long as the clerk reflects it as that the second motion was a motion to amend the prior motion, that motion to amend failed. So
Okay.
the initial motion stands. Are you clear on the initial motion, Madam Clerk? Okay, the answer to that is yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Are we clear? Are we finished with agenda item number 3? Thank you. Agenda item number 4, file number CM 22-73825. If you would like to.
Yeah, just this is a,
Councilman Carlson.
thank you. This is a discussion we've had many times, and the can keeps getting kicked down the road. The issue is that we've had political and other interests targeting city council members with litigation, subpoenas, extensive public record searches, and it's the cost of it is a huge burden on city council. The public feels that these lawsuits or threats of lawsuit are intimidating city council members and could sway votes. That potentially could lead to litigation against the city if someone feels like votes have been swayed because people feel intimidated. But the effect is, as we talked about earlier, city council members get paid $53,000 a year. One who had to resign had spent allegedly up to $80,000 on legal fees, and had the lawsuit continued, potentially was facing bankruptcy. The public and some of us anyway have felt that the city attorneys in the past, not this city attorney, but city attorney in the past, have not fully defended city council, and despite the fact that the charter says that the city attorney's office should. And so it has been recommended by many attorneys outside that we put in some steps to more narrowly define what the protections are, and there's some creative ideas on how to address that. With the idea being that I'll give you one example and I'll shut up. The healthcare, excuse me, the healthcare contract of the city is, healthcare insurance of the city is self-insured, but it is run by a private insurance company. And so the payments that are made under the health insurance policy are made in a decision by the private insurance company, not by a political appointee. So there's no politics in the process, at least in theory. So analogy I've used before, if someone needed a lung transplant, which is very expensive, the private insurance company using the policy of the insurance would decide whether someone gets a lung transplant, how much would go in. At the city, in theory, by charter and by rules, we have city council members or elected officials have, and department heads and volunteer chairs have the fence by the city attorney, but there is a risk policy. But in long discussions, we found that there's a $500,000 deductible. So anything above $500,000 is covered in a policy that's specifically written with specific coverages. But below the $500,000, it's self-insured. And what we discovered through interviewing prior city attorneys is that there's no specifics to it. It's an arbitrary discussion based on how that political appointee interprets the law. And what I think I would want, and probably others, is more certainty, because if there's certainty about how and when a city council member or elected official would be covered, that hopefully would be a deterrent for frivolous lawsuits and help the public feel safe that their elected officials are protected. And ultimately, if an elected official has done something wrong, that goes in a separate category. But when someone is using, if someone used the litigation or threat of litigation to intimidate a city council member or otherwise harm them, that could cause concern in the community. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Shelby.
Mr. Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney. What I have done is taken City Council's discussion over this period of time and attempted to craft a way to address the concern. As I said to you previously, most cities and governmental entities have a reimbursement model. In other words, there's a policy in place that says at the end of the day, when the determination has to be made, that is brought to the body, and then the body considers it for reimbursement. Now, again, the policy that I included in the draft ordinance, which I provided to you, and again, I just want to state that what this is this is a proposal to be able to address what I think are the concerns. I want to just at the outset just state what the policy is, and it's sort of a concise statement of the concern that I've heard expressed by council, and just so that the public is aware of it. That the purpose of this ordinance, which is in the recitals and it's also in the body of it, is that there exists a municipal purpose to expend funds to provide for elected officials to perform their duties while serving a public purpose without personal financial threat of legal action that may have a chilling effect upon the proper performance of their duties and the diligent representation of the public interest, or otherwise dissuade capable and qualified individuals from entering public service. And that was the message that I believe council had given, that why they wanted to move forward with a process, because in effect, the process as it stands now appears to be a case-by-case basis, an ad hoc process. And what I had attempted to do was to look to other jurisdictions to see how they set forth the guidelines to be able so that the people who are governed by this ordinance and by motion, specifically council asked that it apply to elected officials. So it's not an ordinance that doesn't apply, it does not apply to officers or employees, although in other jurisdictions, an indemnification or a policy would generally apply. But this being the case, this ordinance is somewhat unique in that regard. But what I've done is provided a means to allow, as it says in the title of the ordinance, to allow for representation and reimbursement, including payment of associated costs of elected officials in defense of civil litigation, claims, proceedings, actions, and ethics complaints arising out of or in connection with the performance of their official duties while serving a public purpose, and it authorizes a risk fund or insurance for such purpose. And again, for the public so they know, and as Councilmember Carlson stated, it authorizes the recovery of dispersed city funds in the event an elected official is determined to be personally liable. And that was the intent behind this, to create a process so it is at least delineated and clear. It is really an amalgam of many jurisdictions across the state, but very few of the jurisdictions have a process that allows the city attorney to actually, or the twofold. Number one is the city attorney makes the determination, initial determination that the city attorney's office can represent, or in the case of a conflict, the city attorney can assign that and designate a conflict counsel, or in the alternative, then what happened is the elected official who is needing that representation can then engage a private attorney, and the city would then pay those reasonable expenses and costs. And that's basically the model. It's presented for your consideration. I've presented it to the city attorney, who has just, frankly, just received it. And we didn't have had an opportunity to discuss any concerns that the city attorney may have, and I don't know whether we have not talked about it privately at this point in time. So I presented for council. I don't know what council's direction is at this point, but Ms. Zellman, did you, if you have any questions, I appreciate that.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shelby, and I've been looking over the ordinance. You know, we were talking about salaries and, you know, people that want to serve won't be able to serve, whatever, that's a different discussion. But if we don't have protections in place, no one's going to want to serve because of the risk of you vote the wrong way, you do the wrong thing in your official capacity, in your official duties. Who's going to want this? Besides, you know, the stress that comes with it, whatever. But we've seen in the last year, you know, consequences of what have happened, costs that people have incurred. You know, that was already discussed, but I would be glad to support this. I think it's clear. I think, you know, because it specifically specifies in the performance of their official duties, you know, whether it's a vote here on the dais, whether it's, you know, coming from a city email, whatever it is, it's in the official capacity as that elected official. So unless there's any other discussion or concerns, I think it's very clear and well written. I understand it's on a case-by-case basis, but here it says, you know, the city has to defend or should step in to defend an elected official. You said not an officer or whatever, specifically tailored to us or the elected body. That's it. I don't, yeah, I see here, this whereas the purpose of this common law rule is to avoid the chilling effect that a denial of representation might have on public officials in performing their duties properly and diligently. Again, you know, scared to vote one way or another, knowing that they're not going to be covered should there be any litigation or lawsuits. So I'm happy to support this.
Any other questions? Councilman Carlson.
I yield, Mr. Carlson.
I think it's very well written and well researched. It is I think mostly a restatement of what we've heard from city attorney's office with respect to state law and what can and can't be approved. My biggest concern with it is that there's still too much subjectivity in it, and it gives too much flexibility for a city attorney to reject a city council member's request. And even though we have a good relationship with this city attorney, you never know what we're going to get or somebody will have in the future, and city council needs to be protected. The second thing is that I think there has to be some other kind of policy that covers up to some basic limits, and I mentioned this before. For example, and Ms. Shelby and I have talked about this. We can have a further conversations about it. But for example, if the city put in $400,000 into a self-insured fund, and if we needed to, we could each pay, the 8 of us, including the mayor, could pay $1 a month or whatever premium. So it's not the city paying. There are certain restrictions on how the city can reimburse because of state law. But if it's an insurance policy that the city is self-funding, but the premium is paid, I'm just making this up, but as an idea, then what it would do is I think that policy would have very broad definitions about how city council, or sorry, elected officials would be covered up to the first 50,000. That would be a huge deterrent for frivolous lawsuits. And it wouldn't be as restrictive or subjective as the rest of it. And so what I'd like to do separately is maybe make a follow-up motion to have once, if this is passed, have a follow-up motion to come back at another time with that proposal. Also, the chief of staff talked to some folks, and in some cities, as part of the benefits to elected officials, the government agency pays part or all of a premium for an umbrella liability policy for the individual, just like you would pay for health insurance or any other kinds of service. So I think with a combination of those three things, we would be secured enough. And again, if someone does something wrong, then and it breaks the law, no amount of insurance is going to protect that. This is not about protecting anybody who's broken the law, but what it does do is it prevents frivolous or intimidating lawsuits, and it allows elected officials to protect themselves in the face of that.
Anyone else? Councilman Miranda.
Just in my part, and I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with this, but I haven't fully understood or read it completely yet. That's what I want to do first of all. But in my position, I don't, the city of Tampa attorney, whoever he or she may be, is the one that's representing all of us in case there's a lawsuit. Am I correct? I don't.
Yeah, by the charter, yes. Yes.
So then, what we're doing here is asking for a hybrid, or just somebody outside to handle that lawsuit? Is it a hybrid that if a member like myself wants a city attorney, whoever he or she is, to represent me, is that still in here that I can do that? Or do I have to go to that outside of council attorney?
Oh, pardon? It does both. Well, and that's what makes this not the reimbursement model. So the answer is yes, that would be done, and that is something that is provided for. It is still ultimately in all the things that I've looked at throughout the state, somebody has to be responsible for signing off on spending city funds. Now, Councilmember Carlson has talked about a self-insured fund of $400,000, but that would have to be, I guess, funded somehow initially. $1 a month came to mind when you said that. I wonder how that would be. I had an opportunity just to talk briefly this morning with the chief of staff about insurance, and the administration would be willing to work to be talking with the people who deal with their insurance, the broker and the like, to be able to find out different models that can be able to do that. Certainly, that's something that was discussed way back, and when the risk manager was here, and it really wasn't able to be addressed at that time, or it wasn't addressed. So, Council, what I'd like is, and I'm aware of the fact that Ms. Zellman does have some concerns that she and I have not discussed. So I don't know how soon, or when you would like this to come back, but I'd like that opportunity to be able to at least get the benefit of knowing what she knows and what she's concerned about, or what she has, what comments she has. I apologize again. We didn't have the opportunity to do it on such short notice.
Any other questions? Mr. Shelby, just for the public's knowledge, can you
Yes.
define performance of their duties as far as council people are concerned?
Well, when the performance of their duties it's within the scope of what they are set to do. In other words, it's in the, how do I phrase it? What's the best way to put it? The definition of, it's the legal definition for the performance of their duties, but that is something that is done, I don't have that in front of me, I wish I did have the language. I don't have the specific legal definition in front of me to be able to cite it to you.
Before I go to you, Councilman Vieira, I'm not trying to split hairs, but can you give me an instance of something outside of the performance of their duties that may not be covered?
Well, I'll give you an example that was just said to me this morning in the context of, let's say, somebody who is able to take their vehicle to and from work and take it home, and driving home, what they do is they perhaps have something to drink, and that causes a tort, an action against the driver, and perhaps the owner of the vehicle. And then what happens is then that would be found to be perhaps outside the performance of their duties. That is not within the scope of their employment, and that would then make that something that would not then be covered, generally speaking. And a determination of that has to be made at some point in time. The question here, and I think this is some of the concerns of City Council, the question here is at what point is that determination made? Because if that determination is made prematurely, then does that then perhaps signal or indicate that perhaps that the city would not then cover in the event of a lawsuit? And that was a concern of council in the past. And this has been it's been difficult for me, council, to be able to address all the concerns, because I will share with you from a professional and personal perspective, and sitting in that chair for almost 20 years, I have seen the effect that this has had on City Council, and the council's concerned to be able to address it. And I am looking for a way that within the framework of the way this city is structured, and with the city attorney, to be able to resolve this in a way that provides the protection that the council wants. And that has been a challenge, but what I've done is crafted a model to be able to address the concerns as they've been expressed to me. And that's what's here, and I ask for council to be able to give me the opportunity to work with Ms. Zellman to be able to address that.
Come back June 1st?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to finish here. Don't mind. So if I could safely say, anything outside of sunshine would not be covered by this?
A violation of the Sunshine Law.
Yes, sir.
A violation of the Sunshine Law, if there's an allegation of a violation of Sunshine Law, then the facts would have to be determined. The question is, at what point in time are the facts determined, and then what is the action that can be taken? And that is an interesting concept to be able to put into this framework. I'd like that opportunity to do that. I'd like to talk to Ms. Zellman about that. I frankly think that if somebody violates the law in the event of a sunshine violation, it is potentially a crime. And no, that would not be covered.
Thank you. What is the pleasure of, excuse me, is there anyone in council chambers who would like to speak to agenda item number 4?
I love workshop days. Good morning, Stephanie Pointer. I'm the president of THAN. I'm the president of the Gandy Civic Association, and I'm the president of Southtown Park. Or actually, I'm not, but I'm still on the board. And in each one of those.
Let me ask you, Ms. Pointer, are you speaking on behalf of THAN?
No,
or
sir,
are
I
you just
am not.
speaking for
No, sir, I
Ms.
did not say
Stephanie
I'm
Pointer?
speaking.
Okay,
I'm
thank
speaking
you.
as a board member on 3 much smaller boards. All 3 of those boards have director's insurance. All 3 of them do. Why? Because it makes sense. Because people who volunteer or make a pittance to do a job should not have to worry about legal liabilities. That's what insurance is for. As a realtor, I have an umbrella policy that covers my business. Why would anybody think it's okay to not have insurance? What about the parts of your job that you do that aren't in here? Like the ribbon cutting, the parades, when you go to neighborhood meetings. Those things should be covered too, because even though they're not officially part of your job, they're part of the job that you do. And last but not least, let's talk about Councilman Dingfelder, because that's where all this stems from. I would like to make it 100% clear for the millionth time My name was in the lawsuit. Gene Strohmeyer's name was in the lawsuit. I'm going to tell you right here, right now, that I never had any contact with Councilman Dingfelder via Lynn Dingfelder's personal email. But no one ever asked me. So violation of sunshine didn't happen. So when you have frivolous lawsuits being filed and people have to give up their personal savings to deal with that crap, it's ridiculous. What really befuddles me is that I am the person who makes nothing for coming here. But this is the second time today that I have come up here to argue with all of you to do something for the seats that you sit in. Why do I, as somebody who doesn't make any money for doing this, have to say this is something that absolutely makes sense? We have 8 elected officials in the city of Tampa. The city staff, for some reason, not all of them, but the public affairs bunch, they think we only have 1 elected official. I would like for you to make a motion to elect to protect the seats that you sit in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Goode.
I mean, I've been here almost 4 years now, and sometimes I don't understand. I just really don't. Things that are just, like she said, are common sense. I just don't understand. Things that we know are wrong, we don't fix. We wait around, and I just don't understand. You know, I've run several youth programs for decades. And I'm talking about nationally. And all of our officers have director's insurance. All of them. All of them. So what she says is the truth. She's not coming there just to argue a point. It's a valid point that every league that I've run in my national leagues, John Sadler is a good friend of mine. He owns Sadler Insurance. We make sure that every officer, we place director's insurance on them. In case a crime is committed, or in case they do something, in case, you know, they're defending kids, they're defending themselves. I mean, there's insurance on them that they don't go bankrupt because they're volunteering. You know, in the course of a job, things happen. You know, things just happen sometimes. But to not have someone to defend you, if you don't have money, what do you do? What if you're a person who don't have any money, can afford an attorney? But, you know, you're volunteering because you want to serve the city of Tampa. You want to serve the people. But are those people going to give you any money for a damn attorney? I'm just going to be honest. Do they have the money to give you money for an attorney? They'll say, I wish you well. You have some gentleman come up and say, well, I'll start a GoFundMe account for you. But at the end of the day, you're talking about wrecking your family's livelihood with their money. It's just your money, their money. So to me, this is not a difficult thing to do because it's done every day. It's done every day. You just have to want to do it, and just do it, regardless. Insurance companies out there all day long get direct insurance on a council, whatever, and you pay, even if a council member had to pay individually. At least, hell, you won't go bankrupt. I think Ms. Pointer and some of the citizens that thought it was not robbery doing this these 4 years to bring things to light that other people were scared to do. Times are changing, the city's changing, people are getting involved in their local government and they're seeing things that aren't right and want them done the right way. You have council members or people who are elected to get on these boards now who are more vocal now, who are making sure the government is doing the right things and not get along people anymore. And that's what the citizens want. They don't want go along, get along people. They want somebody who will address their issues and concerns. But with that comes a price at times. With that comes a price that you may be attacked politically. So, you know, again, I won't be here. I'm still defending myself, and I always will defend myself. Mr. Rand said one time, I'll go bankrupt. I'll go broke, man. I'll go broke, man.
I'm the same way.
I'll go damn it broke to defend my honor, defend my character. And I'm going to do that. Trust me. I'm going to do that. Long from over for me. Things have to be rectified, Mr. Shelby, with me. But I'm just saying, I hope council members understand the reality of, let's not look at the political, but look at the reality of what this time and era is, what others are doing to get their point across in intimidating ways and factors. So I'm hoping that, you know, whatever this council decides to do, that it'll be beneficial for the next group of folks so they can be protected. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Chairman. And reading all this, it strikes me on various levels. When you're growing up, you hear people talk and you take advice or don't take the advice of the elders. You certainly don't ask somebody 3 or 4 years old for advice when you're 16 or 17, whatever it is. So I remember one thing specifically in my life is that, and I've said it before here on council, when my father put a dime in my hand, I said, "What's that for?" And he told me this: "When you if you get in trouble, call somebody else." That's when they had public stations all over the place for a dime. And that's always set in my mind. And now I hear Councilman Good so rightly say that no matter what the cause is, if I feel that I'm innocent, and I know that I'm innocent, feeling is one thing, knowing is another. I would never resign, I would never give up, whoever sues me, until the day that I'm broke or the day that I die. That was instilled in me when you were growing up. And as I see this, yes, you sit on boards, all boards in the city, all boards wherever you're at, outside the city, if you're not a city employee, whatever, and you sit on any board, usually you have insurance. You know why? Because they don't have an attorney that oversees the board members, that has the political know-how how to defend someone. So therefore, I just, if in my case something happens, the city attorney, whoever he or she is, going to represent me at the least cost to the taxpayers and as good as advice as you're going to get anywhere else. So that's just me. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but there's an attorney here, whoever that attorney may be, and there's a legal staff here to do the research also. So that's my case, and you can vote any way you want. That's what you should do. But I'm not going to go with anybody paying any insurance for me in case I do something wrong. If I do it with the automobile, certainly you got automobile coverage. You have home insurance coverage. So these are the things that I was growing up with, and those are the things that I'm going to die with. Thank you very much.
Councilman Carlson.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to ask City Council Attorney to return on June 1st with a ordinance for first reading consideration.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Vera?
Yes.
Maniscalco?
Yes.
Miranda?
Yes, but if it's me, I'm going to get my own attorney, the city's.
Hurtak?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Goods?
Yes.
Citro?
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
I'd like to make a second motion to, and again, this is in regard to file number CM 22-73825, like to make a motion to ask the City Council Attorney to return on June 1st with a report on the possibility of a small self-insurance fund and/or the Chief of Staff's idea to have liability umbrella insurance as a benefit.
Second.
For discussion.
May I ask, Mr. Carlson, if you include the risk manager in that discussion as well? Did you want the risk manager present or not? Because, counsel, let me just share with you, in drafting this, the complexity of it is the fact, as it was stated, that the city is self-insured, which means the first $500,000 is the deductible.
I think, without getting into the specifics of
Yes.
it, you could, I made the motion to have you come back and you decide who you want to bring with you.
Okay,
Second.
I'll invite them, whoever is appropriate then. Thank you, sir.
We have a motion made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Any further discussion? Let's have a roll call vote.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Goods,
Yes.
Vieira,
Yes.
Citro.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Can I just make a final comment?
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, just, thank you all for voting on those two. I'm not going to make a motion right now, but former council member Dingfelder is prohibited, by what I read in the media, is prohibited from asking for reimbursement of funds for his situation. I won't relitigate the facts here, but I think at some point, city council should voluntarily offer to reimburse him. He had a GoFundMe account which paid a small portion of it, but it was an undue burden put on he and his family. Second, our current colleague who will be leaving soon, Orlando Goods, and again, I won't relitigate that situation, but and I don't know how much he spent, but a judge has twice thrown out the court case against him, which meets the test of the state allowing us to reimburse. And if we look at the situation, as we talked about in the last meeting, the city attorney and the mayor's office both were involved in publicizing a potential litigation, which in both cases, which potentially led to or was the cause of litigation. And so I think in both cases, the city has some liability if we don't proactively reimburse for expenses. So I would ask, since I'm not allowed to ask in a private forum, I would ask if he hasn't already for Councilmember Goods to submit whatever costs he has to date, and that upon the advice of city attorney that I or someone would bring this up, because it's not fair for city council members to be sued in oblivion without support.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilman.
Did you get, was that I didn't get what, did you state a motion?
That was a motion.
Council, just in general, because this came up today, and moving forward, and we could have this discussion down the road, but when you frame your motions, generally speaking, just do it in the mindset that you want to see what it is going to appear on paper, because on the agenda, because that is reflected in paper and it's distributed, it goes to staff. So just be mindful of the fact that when you have a discussion and you want to make the motion, put it in the form that you want it to appear when it comes back, so that it truly reflects what your intention is.
I'm happy. Let me, if
I'm
you all don't mind, let me just try to make a motion. I would ask that the city council attorney and city attorney return on April 6th to discuss I'm just trying to do it before. April 20th. To city council attorney and city attorney to return on April 20th to discuss the possibility of reimbursing former council member Dingfelder and council member Goods for their legal fees.
Second.
Who's the second? You second? We have a motion by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Any further discussion? Councilman Miranda.
I just don't know enough about these cases to get involved, and I don't know. I haven't followed either one of those cases, so I'm not going to vote yes.
Councilman Goods.
Mr. Carlson, again, you're a good council member, and I appreciate you. But at this time, there's a lot of litigation that will be done with the city after I leave. A lot of litigation. And so I prefer at this time, I appreciate your efforts, but we have good attorneys on board. We got a few more hurdles to climb, and we got some other attorneys that we're bringing on board for some other things that have happened. So I thank you, but if you just retract your motion, we have good attorneys on board, and we're going to, we'll deal with the situation.
Could I just amend my motion to remove Councilmember Goods and just discuss former Councilmember Dingfelder then?
Just for the record, please withdraw your first motion and then go
Okay.
ahead and state your motion.
Just
again,
withdraw the
please.
first motion, and new motion would be to ask the city council attorney and city attorney to return on April 20th to discuss the possibility of reimbursing former councilmember Dingfelder for his legal fees.
And this is just a discussion.
Yes.
We have a motion made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Any further discussion? Councilman Vieira.
I wish we had more time.
Yeah, we gotta go.
Yeah, I know Councilman Dingfelder, I don't want to vote no on this, but I'll just say it, I'll be honest with you. I'm tired of what I have to call the city council culture wars. We continue to deal with issues again and again and again and again. I'm not casting blame on anybody. It's just something I am personally very, very tired of. That's all I'm saying. It seems that we continue to escalate things and get hotter and hotter and hotter on these issues. And again, with 2 minutes on something with somebody that I've known for a while, when there could be legal issues with this, you know what? Could this be brought up maybe this evening when I can talk to legal about it? Because I would hate to prematurely vote one way or another out of deference to our former colleague, if that could be done.
If we put it on the agenda, we can always pull it off the agenda, or we can defer it at a certain point, but this is just asking for a discussion on it.
If it's just second.
We have a motion made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Mr. Shelby, did you want to say something? You're looking like you want to say something.
Yes, I do look that way, don't I?
Well, cross-eyed there, yeah.
With all due respect to the parties involved, that is an unanticipated motion on my part, and I don't know whether it's out of order. It can certainly be voted on, but I believe Councilmember Vieira was, and I won't ask you to put it in the form of a motion unless that's something you want. I don't certainly want to put council, and I don't know what the effect of this. This is unusual to be discussed.
If it turns out that we can't do it, we can always pull it off the agenda, but.
So how do you frame your motion then, to discuss?
I said just to discuss the possibility of reimbursing.
Okay, and that's the case. It's on the agenda, and then what happens is we can work that out. Is that it? Do you have an issue with that? Okay.
I want them to make the announcement about the 11.
Yes, the 11 o'clock.
May I explain my vote?
Yes.
I'm going to vote, thank you, sir. I'm going to vote yes out of courtesy to Councilman Dingfelder, et cetera, and it's for discussion. But again, my objections are on this, but I'll, out of courtesy, I will.
And I should say for the record, please, that Councilmember Dingfelder and nobody on his behalf has asked me to do this. This is my own principle of trying to make sure that we pass these things as a deterrent from city councils members being attacked in the future. Thank you.
We still have the same motion by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Miranda,
No.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Goods,
Yes.
Vieira,
Yes.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
Citro.
No.
Motion passed with Miranda and Citro voting no.
Mr. Chairman, I bring to your attention it's 11 o'clock.
Yes, I understand that. We will skip with the information and reports right now. We are now.
If you can read.
I will, but we're adjourned for the
No,
first one?
no, you're not adjourned.
Thank you very much.
As a matter of fact, I just want to be clear for the record. You are in session, you're remaining in session.
Thank you.
And you're reading this during this session.
At this time, in accordance with Florida Statute 286.0118, we will proceed to a closed attorney-client session to discuss settlement negotiations in the case of Robert Vasso and the City of Tampa, case number 817 CV 02896, which is currently pending in the Middle District of Florida. This closed session is estimated to last approximately 45 minutes and will be recorded by a certified court reporter. The names of the persons attending the closed session are as followed. Councilmember Citro, Councilmember Bill Carlson, Councilmember Orlando Goods, Councilmember Lynn Hurtak, Councilmember Guido Maniscalco, Councilmember Charlie Miranda, Councilmember Luis Vieira, City Council Attorney Martin Shelby, City Attorney Andrea Zellman, Assistant City Attorney David Harvey, and Certified Court Reporter Debbie Guest from Reporters on Madison. At the conclusion of the closed attorney-client session, this meeting will be reopened, and I will announce the termination of the session. A transcript of the closed attorney-client session shall be made part of the public records upon conclusion of litigation in the Vaso case. We will now go to the conference room on the 8th floor.
For the closed session, sir, thank you.